Welcome to the Irish Pagan School podcast. Your hosts are authors and co-founders of the Irish Pagan School here in County Waterford, Ireland, Laura O'Brien and Jon O'Sullivan. Fáilte.
What do we know about the Dagda as a father figure? Well, Dagda Eve agus Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. Jon O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School. And that is a question that we have been asked from our community, and I'm delighted to take the time to answer it because we actually have a lot of information that gives us insight and perspective on the nature and the way Dagda functions and as a father figure. Now, the first thing we need to clarify really is the Dagda has an epithet, which is an extra name and another name on him, which is known as Olathair. Now, it is misconstrued and misunderstood for many years, really. It's not all father. It's not that. It's not the same. He's not he's not a dispater as phrased by Julius Caesar in this kind of one god who gave birth to all of the other gods, i.e. Odin in the Norse functions, who is known as an Olathair, or Zeus or Jupiter, depending on which way, and them being the one god that gave birth to all of the other gods. That is not the Irish pantheon. That's not how it works. The Irish collection, the Tuatha De Danann, are descendants. They're a tribe descended from an older tribe. They're a collection of people. So there is no one created father deity that they all come from. So just to clarify that, he's not the father of all of the gods, but he is Olathair, and Olathair translate as great or ample father. And so he is this big father figure. Essentially, he is a big daddy for the Tuatha De Danann, and not just for the kids that are his own, which we know is, of course, the goddess Brigid. There's Kermit, there's Aed, there's Anya, there's Midger, and the other last one, the young child, the young son, Oengus. He's not just a biological father, though. He's also a foster father, because in some of the stories, either Midger may not be a blood child of his, but is his foster son. In other versions of the story, Manannán Mac Lir has fosterage, has been raised in fosterage, which with the Dagda as well. So when we look at the tribal society, the Tua style of Ireland, fosterage was very common. It wasn't a case that someone would be born and raised exactly by their own blood parents, that families just kept to their own kids. Like it really was a case that like it takes a tribe, it takes a community to raise a child. And that was quite common in the tribal structures. So a child born would be a child of the tribe, a collective. So it would make sense that the Dagda would be this good god of druidry, but he's also this powerful deity. He's also a very passionate and patient deity that we have seen. He's this god of hospitality. So like you come to him, you're welcomed, you're taken care of. He's a god of music. He plays the harp and sets the seasons in order, which means he also understands the way to use music to help people process their emotions. So I could see the Dagda with his understanding of playing the joyful strain, being able to play a ditty for the children to get them laughing and playing. Or, when children are weeping and upset and bemoaning, he has music to play the Galtre, the wailing strain, or the sad music that helps people feel their emotions. And of course, when kids are running riot, you need to kind of calm them down and get them to take a freaking nap. There is the Soontre. This is the third of the three great strains, which meant that people listening to that music would fall asleep. So I have this image. I haven't written a story about it, but I think I may need to. About the Dagda babysitting all the kids and then just using the music to help them go through their processes and then to take a fucking nap. So the way that we look at the Dagda and the Dagda's interactions with his children is actually documented in the stories. Very famously, there is the story of how he took up the club or the staff of life and death, and that is because of his son Kermit. So one of his sons, Kermit, has a relationship with one of Lou's wives, and Lou kills him for it. The Dagda is bereaved and totally upset by it. He stops the corruption of the body of his child. He then carries his adult child on his shoulders out of Ireland and says he goes into the east to find a way to bring back his child. Eventually, he does this. He comes across three other people out there who have been given their inheritance from their own father figure or grandfather, I think it was. And one of them is this club that has a rough end that will kill, a gentle end that will bring people back to life. He asks to see the club, they give it to him. He then kills the three guys, the three brothers, and then uses the gentle end to bring Kermit back to life. How does this give us an insight into the Dagda as a father figure? Well, he's in his own circumstance. He's not going to let it. He's going to do anything he can for his kid. But the thing I really love, and I point to time and again with this story, is Kermit's brought back to life. The story doesn't end there. It's not happy ever after. Kermit's back alive and the Dagda's tried to murder three people. The first thing Kermit does when he's brought back to life is see the three bodies and say, "Why should I have life when it has been taken from them?" He berates his father. He calls out the injustice of the deed. And so the Dagda uses the club and brings the three brothers back to life. And they're like, "Hey, dude, not cool." Of course, I'm paraphrasing. That's not exactly how it's written in the mythology. But essentially, the Dagda binds himself with a magical oath that he will return the club. He just needs to borrow it for a time being. But he doesn't just borrow it to take the power because he wants to. He adds an extra layer of the binding, which is to bring death to his enemies and life to his friends. And so it's not just a case of he's going to be indiscriminately rocking around, dropping life and death all over the place. He's very clear about the ethical use of that power. Now, the moral of the story, there's a lot of different ways to look at that. I think I've done a video on the Dictus Club. You can look that up if you're interested. But really, the insight as a father figure from Kermit's point of view, Kermit is able to talk to his dad about what is just and what is unjust. Kermit is able to see a situation having just come back to life and straight up call out his dad for poor behavior. And if that's not a good kind of showing of what a father should be, it's setting the right example for the kids and making it safe for the kids to dispute things, to talk about things, and also to tell you that you're wrong and that you've made a mistake so that you can do better and continue to inspire them to do better. Um, Other story that we have is Aed. Aed is another son of the Dagda who is slain as well. But in this instance, the Dagda doesn't have the club, but he's king in Ireland. And so as a king, he's obligated to give a kingly judgment. He can't just go, "Well, eye for an eye, like fuck you, you killed my kid." The perpetrator's Corcoran in this instance. And so he gives a judgment for Corcoran that Corcoran needs to carry the body of Aed until he finds an appropriate place with an appropriate memorial stone to bury Aed under. And so it says that Corcoran does carry the body of Aed around Ireland, and then he finds a place. Eventually, he finds a suitable stone up in Donegal at a place called Green on Olathair, and that's where Aed is buried underneath that stone. The Dagda then arrives, and he builds a fortress up and around that is the story of Green on Olathair. But it shows another insight to the Dagda's perspective. Yes, he will absolutely go out of his way for his children, but he understands that when he's in a position of responsibility for the tribe, and not just for the tribe, but for the rule of Ireland, he can't compromise his own form of justice. He can't compromise justice to do what he would want to do or take any other step or any other unjust action just because it's his kid. And so it gives us another insight into him as a father figure. You know, he raises kids who have a sense of moral right and wrong, who can correct him when he steps out of bounds. But also he understands that when he has responsibilities, he needs to live to those responsibilities in a very functional and principled way so that he's maintaining that aspiration, that show for his kids. One of the other great stories is, of course, Oengus. Now, Oengus is the young son because Oengus was conceived and born all in one 9-month day because the Dagda stopped the son so he could have his relationship with the very consenting and very interested and very up for it Boan, who was married to someone else at the time, which is why all of this happens. So Oengus is conceived and born, and Boan is restored, and then the Dagda takes Oengus away and puts him to be raised with one of his other children, Midir. So later on, Oengus comes into his, growing up, he comes into his full as a young adult, and he's looking for lands to be gifted to him. And so the Dagda helps him gain Newgrange, the bend in the Boyne, because that's his mother's territory. For helping him with that, Midir, who is, again, son of the Dagda, but foster father to Oengus, because it's the relationship is kept within the family and to be supported and connected in the right way. It's a lovely one. And goes back to that, it takes a tribe to raise a child. But Oengus ends up Well, Midir ends up getting a wounding placed upon him when he's visiting Angus. And Angus is like, I'll make it up to you. I will find for you the most beautiful woman in all of Ireland. And then he goes and makes overtures for a Taun. And so the story is called The Wooing of a Taun. And so Angus is trying to woo a Taun through her father to try and bring her to wed with Midir. Um, but Angus starts making promises that he can't fulfill. The Taun's father isn't all that chuffed about it, but he's like, okay, I'll tell you what to do is I have this entire forest here. I need to grow food there. So if you clear the forest, then we can talk about like, a Taun maybe wedding your brother. And Angus is like, okay. And of course, Aton's father thinks this is going to be a labor for ages and ages. It's going to give me a whole lot of time to try and figure out some other way out of this. But Angus then goes to the Dagda and is like, yeah, I need to clear this entire forest. I've made a promise. And the Dagda's like, okay. And so he clears the entire forest in one night. So it's great. Angus goes back. He's like, yep, all those trees are gone. It's perfect. But the father of Atan is straight away was like, well, he's like, oh, fuck, all the trees are gone quite suddenly. How am I going to deal with it from here? And he then says, well, it's not exactly a plain. I need to irrigate it and get it grown so I can actually grow crops there. And so again, Angus goes back to his dad, the Dagda, and it's like, yeah, I need to then irrigate. I need to, and the Dagda the next night draws out rivers around this new plain so that it would be irrigated and ready to grow. It really shows that the Dagda is very powerful. He has all of this ability, but it's not just power for the sake of power, it's power for the sake of purpose. And the purpose to which he puts his power is to support his children. Also, Angus is making promises, he's getting a little bit over his head, and it's core that a dad would 100% turn up and bail out their child when they need that assistance. Um, so there are many different stories where we can see the way that Dagda interacts as a father figure from the point of view of supporting your children when they need support, setting a good example to raise your children, but then also being willing to do whatever it takes to care for your children, to go to the edge of the world itself in order to look after and to bring back essentially or to care for the well-being of your children. All of this gives us a great insight into who and what the Dagda is, not as the god, not as the great god of Druidry, not as this king of all Ireland. Yeah, there are facets of it, but also as a straight up dad, being able to, be a kind of father figure that the children will come and talk to no matter what. If they get themselves in trouble, they get themselves in over their head, they'll still come to the Dagda about it. When the Dagda himself is kind of breaking the principles that he has set for them and shown them, they're comfortable to turn around. Like Kermit can turn around to the Dagda and say, what is fair, what is just. And that's a very healthy expression, a very healthy relationship for someone who's known as Olathair, a great and ample father. So, I am so inspired by the story of this Olathair, this great and ample father. Great and ample father is very fancy language. If we make it a little bit more generic, it's Big Daddy. So he is the Big Daddy god of the Tuatha De Danann, not because he gave birth to all of the two gods, not because he is the singular father, but he fulfills that role of fatherhood, the compassion, the care. When it comes to the digging of security for Rathbresh, it's the Dagda who is doing it. When it comes to all of the oncoming conflicts and everything else, trying to prevent the war with the Fomorians, Dagda puts his body on the line to try and do that. When it comes to the wars against the Firbolg to come into Ireland, he's there putting his body on the line. When Nuada goes down fighting Shreng and has his arm cut off, the only reason Nuada carries on alive is because the Dagda arrives and stands over the fallen friend, the fallen king, to prevent anyone getting the last blow on Nuada. And so there is time and again all of these great examples of who this individual is, but then also we have the view of him just as a straight up dad. And there are some stories about him and Bridget, not as many as some of the others, and that's where I've explored it myself. But I don't think you would have ended up with blacksmith, fire embodied Bridget, or poetry or healing embodied Bridget if it wasn't for the fact that her father was there to guide her and to give her and to help her along with the skills along the way. But that's a little bit of personal gnosis on the end of it. When I consider it myself, for me as a practicing pagan and as a stepfather, It is about the lessons and the stories of like patience, the continuing, the turning up, the letting the children know you're always going to be there for them, and making it safe for them to communicate in whatever way they choose to, and being open to those and available for that connection, because our children grow up into the next generation of the world, and so every moment we spend with them is a moment of joy for ourselves, absolutely, but it's also a way for them to become the best version of themselves. And I look at the stories of the Dagda as inspiration for that. Know your music, know your emotional intelligence, do what you got to do, turn up, do the hard work where the hard work is called for, and live as a good example. Live as a good, and actually on Laura Moore, this is the last thing I'll say. The club, the story of the club, going back to the top end there, it is the story about this great club about life and death. It's Kermit being brought back from the dead, so the Dagda takes up this power over life and death. And the wording Oscuelga in Irish is Lorag Mór, which is big staff or big club. But there's another translation of Lorag Mór, which is also great example. So that story, is it about a magic club bringing life and death, etc.? Maybe. Or is it a story about a great example of a father who goes out of his way to bring back his kid, but then also is held accountable for his own behaviors by the kid he brings back? Who's to say for sure? But it is one that inspires me, and I work really hard to try and be a big example, to be a good example for myself, for my kids, and for anyone in our tour or tribe and community. And so I will continue to do that work to the best of my ability. So thank you very much for the Kesh. I really appreciate the question, asking that. The Dagda as a father figure is well worth exploring and well worth looking into from a personal perspective of anyone who's following a pagan path. Go to irishpagan.school/free for a year's worth of free content. There is also the class there, the Dagda, domestic deity and hearth hero. So it's those other aspects of him as a god, not just of druidry and battle and physicality, but also as a god of domesticity and hospitality. So until next time, look after yourself and take care. Slán. Goodbye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a positive review in your podcast listener. Then head over to irishpaganschool.com and enroll in one of our free or paid courses. Slán go fóill, and we will see you next time.